Okay, that's all the errors and misrepresentations. But if the council wants the street performers to engage and cooperate, they'll have to apologise for a lot of insults as well. The first of which is by continually treating busking with a total lack of respect. For example, several times in the reports, its authors make the claim about how much the council likes street performance. The council continues to recognise the cultural contribution that busking adds to the city's vibrancy and character. The council acknowledges the cultural contribution of busking and street entertainment. The thing is, the council never actually acknowledges nor recognises the cultural contribution that busking provides, outside of those sentences. In fact, those sentences only serve as what's known as a rhetorical shield, like the phrase, "I am not racist, but..." You can see why if we add in the next part of those texts. However, there continue to be adverse impacts, and while recognising the adverse impacts in certain locations. In fact, the report even attempts to distance buskers from the cultural impact they make. Here's the first paragraph of the 2023 report, one that the buskers I've spoken to mentioned several times. Westminster is populated with nationally and internationally recognised commercial, cultural and tourist destinations, creating a vibrant and exciting atmosphere. These high footfall areas are also attractive to buskers, helping to create a lively and diverse street scene unique to our city. In other words, Westminster is the place to be, and buskers just piggyback. But academic research around the world, and the briefest scan of Westminster Google Maps and TripAdvisor reviews, shows that street performer ecosystems don't just feed off of high footfall areas, they also generate them. Any recognition of the contribution buskers actually provide would show that. The one place I could find where Westminster Council has tried to demonstrate the impact buskers have made over the years is in a section titled History of Busking and Street Entertainment in London, published within the pages of the Busking and Street Entertainment Policy document from 2021. That's the PDF that buskers are given to tell them what the rules are. That history could have started with the first record of busking in Covent Garden. Samuel Pepys's diary entry from May 9th, 1662 talks about an Italian street performer there putting on a puppet show. It is assumed that he's talking about Punch and Judy, the famously violent puppet show that Italian street performers brought to Britain's shores. Thanks to this diary entry, May 9th is now considered to be Punch and Judy's UK birthday. The Punch and Judy pub in Covent Garden even takes its name from the puppet shows that entertain the children of the flower sellers, which were still being put on 125 years after Pepys' diary entry when the pub was founded. When you think about it, it's pretty impressive that busking has been going on in Covent Garden since 1662. That's before the Black Plague or the Great Fire of London, before the first English language dictionary had been written, before the first bridge across the Thames, or before the country had its first Prime Minister, before the steam engine, the photograph, or electricity had been invented, and, importantly, over 3 centuries before Westminster City Council was put in charge of the borough. Instead of all that, the council decided to start their history with an insult. The first image in their timeline is of a 1741 drawing titled The Enraged Musician by William Hogarth. It depicts a rowdy bunch outside making a din so loud that the nice musician indoors is forced to cover his ears. But if that is the council's idea of a joke, rather than a straight-up insult, it's not as clever as they think. Hogarth's image is not as it seems. This painting is actually a commentary on a shift in British tastes away from pompous continental influences like Italian operas and towards British music and homegrown culture. Presumably, whichever council official chose to add the enraged musician is unaware of its real message, that the condescending, white-wigged, floppy-sleeved man can complain all he wants from within his stone walls, but the people have spoken and the music they've chosen is here to stay. Perhaps this image is a helpful reminder that noise complaints about buskers shouldn't be considered sacrosanct. However, the second image on the council's history has no hidden message. Titled, sarcastically, Harmony in Leicester Square, it depicts a barking dog and a startled cat, plus a trio of musicians, a family of singers, a bagpiper, an organ grinder, a tambourinist, and more, a cacophony of noise directed at the houses without an audience. These are nuisances that residents must endure, not shows to be watched. What's interesting about this image is I could find only one reference to it online, and no backstory. It seems to exist solely in the British Museum's archive and nowhere else. It took work for the council to find this insult. After those 2 gems, where does the council go next? To a collection of arbitrary photographs of buskers, none of whom have an audience. This isn't a celebration of a culture, this is just one insult after another. They could have mentioned that the British skiffle craze, a largely busking phenomenon that swept the country in the late 1950s, was centred around Westminster's Soho, and launched the careers of members of the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, The Who, Pink Floyd, Deep Purple, the Bee Gees, and the Beatles. Or they could have mentioned that Eddie Izzard had started his career doing a comedy juggling act in Covent Garden, as did the fire-breathing Pierce Brosnan. Or they could have mentioned that Paul Simon had busked in Leicester Square, or that Elvis Costello, Eric Clapton, Jeremy Irons, Paul Bettany, and Rod Stewart had all, at one time or another, busked around London in their youths. But no, their history started with an attempted insult, then an actual insult, then a series of minor slights. There is a rich busking history in London, one of the most fascinating histories of any busking ecosystem, along with thousands of freely available photos online of street performers entertaining huge crowds in the city. That the council made the choice, instead, to post lackluster photos with no backstory might sound like a minor thing, but imagine if we created a history of Westminster City Council and decided to start that with the time that the leader of the council, Shirley Porter, spent millions of pounds of public money to illegally evict Labour voters into scheduled-to-be-demolished, asbestos-ridden towers with no heating or ventilation so that their flats could be sold to Tory voters who'd then deliver a landslide victory for John Major, who promptly made Porter a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire as thanks, a title she holds to this day. We could then follow that with photos of all the subsequent Westminster Council leaders who benefited from the new electoral map in Westminster until the Tories got voted out in 2022. Did that sound insulting? Because at least it would be accurate, instead of relying on a cartoonish mockery of their history. This may sound like too minor a thing to focus on, but the council's disdain for its street performers is clear everywhere you look, not just in these reports. If the council actually wants cooperation, they should apologise to their buskers for insulting them for years.